Today I'm going to try another one of the elemental reflections in honor of the last new moon of 2024. So I've placed on my spread here all of the cards that contain hexagrams with the moon element present in them, starting with the mooniest of moon cards, one I referred to in my sun video, where moon is over moon. This one's called the Abyss. It's number 29. I've also represented it with an eye, and the eye is also maybe like looking down into a well, right? The primary concept when we have the moon in this magnified form is depth. So much depth, truly reaching into the inner self, the things that are really really deeply buried and maybe a little bit obscured from us. And so the primary concept, I think, is depth and knowing the self and navigating that aspect of the self. And then again, as we had with the sun set, this is the moon and the sun. We get the last two hexagrams of the I Ching, sun over moon, moon over sun, before ending, after ending. That cyclical night and day rotation process, ongoing process of beginnings and endings that we are all kind of entwined in. That is these two cards. From here, we have one of my favorite two sets. This is Moon in the World, and the army is number 7. It's about kind of those reserves of power, and the images of pools of water within a cave. In this sense, the world is the cave, and the moon is that pool that's beneath the surface of the cave. And again, a depth aspect here. Those resources we have within us, within ourselves, that can be harnessed when we train them into an army, right? To help us fight our battles. And then with 8, union, we have the moon guiding the waves of the earth as it's known to do. So the world is that ocean aspect is represented by the world, and then the moon is driving it. And when these forces are in union with one another, the army forces referred to in hexagram 7, we get this sort of coordinated, beautiful coordination of energy for a purpose and a cause, right? So then the moon in heaven, with those two, we have 5, calm, where the moon is above heaven, and 6, struggle, where the moon is below heaven. And these are both not movement, right? So in the I Ching, every hexagram has an inherent movement that it's sort of suggesting or describing, or that it's just an aspect of those elements working together create a kind of motion, right? And in both of these, we have two kinds of non-motion. In 5, it's a very intentional sort of leisure or rest. Sometimes besides calm, it's called pause. And it's sort of like a savoring moment of restoration. And then with struggle, we have this sort of block, right? An obstruction. We aren't moving. We are stopping because we are stuck. And that's what these branches kind of represent, is that struggle to move forward. And it says in this one that it's beneficial to find a stopping place because the struggle will only further entrench us. So that's the relationship with moon and heaven. They are not very favorable to motion in that sense. Let's see what we got here next. And something I love, 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 love about the moon element is that it takes so many different forms in the I Ching. And so we got it in these sets here where it's all pretty much like the object of the moon in the sky is what we're seeing, with the exception of this one where it took on that pool of water in a cave. And it does take on a pool of water sort of aspect um, in other hexagrams. So the moon becomes a water here with vanishing. We have the moon beneath air. And in this case, air or wood becomes this boat, and the moon becomes the ocean. It's big water. It's big, um, scary water that we must navigate very carefully with the air wood element here. Um, in hexagram 48, also air and moon, right? So in here, air is the boat and the moon is the ocean. And look at the difference here. When the moon is above the air, it is the well again, like we saw with the abyss. Um, and it's this tiny little bucket of water that's contained completely, has been completely harnessed or held by the wooden, the air, which is a wooden bucket in this case. So whereas we're navigating the waters with our little boat, here the waters are held completely contained by the wooden bucket. And that's how the moon and air relate to each other, which is very interesting. It becomes this sort of very stable object here and a very unstable object here. Can't move a well. The well is where the well is. You build your city around the well. And here, there's no concept of even, why would you even try to contain it in this form, right? Very interesting dynamic. When we see the moon, another form that I find very interesting here. So moon and water. Moon and water are so interesting. So we get, with 47, the moon beneath the water. In this case, it's a dried up lake bed is the image. The moon has become a pit. We see it become a pit again in another hexagram. And the water has just completely fallen out of it. It has dried all up. And with 60, 47 hardship, 60 restraint, we have the moon above the water. And the moon here is also a pit, but it's a pit that holds the water back. It's a dam. It's a dam that creates the pit that holds this water back. And so that's a very kind of the pit aspect comes in over here too. So these three plus the well, I think, kind of give us this idea of the moon as being this sort of absence of water, even though some translations of the I Ching, the moon element is called water. And then you see it in these images where the water is being gone. The water is no more. It's not there. So with this one, we have the moon beneath the earth, and it's a pit at the foot of a mountain. This is hexagram 4 in maturity, where you have sort of sprouted out, which is over here. You've broken free as a little bean sprout through the earth, and then you look up and you're like, gosh, here I am at the foot of a mountain. I'm a brand new little person, little plant with a lot of growing to do. So 3, the moon here is a storm cloud. Not the only time it's a storm cloud, but we'll see that in a minute. So this is where the moon is interacting with fire. It's over fire. And fire sometimes is translated as lightning or thunder, right? So it's the lightning that is bringing life to the soil. It is sparking the seed in order to germinate it. And the moon is the storm cloud. this obstruction um, element that we might think of with that element, that the concepts of the Western concepts of the moon, where it's sort of a cloudy, subconscious, unconscious, unclear, murky sort of place. Um, and that's where the storm cloud, I think, kind of aligns well with that. So the other one where we see it as a storm cloud is this one, 40 shooting, where we have fire over the moon. And in this case, we have arrows that have been caught on fire shooting out into the storm. A battle that is happening in the storm. Shooting, I think of, is sometimes called deliverance, I believe. It's the fight for your freedom. It's the Revolutionary War. So the arrows represent that shooting or aiming to be free with fiery passion. In the storm, it's like you got to fight it in the storm. It's a murky battle. It's going to be a battle that's hard to see in. And that's one that corresponds with these two actually have fire and moon in them together. But there's in terms of sequences, so like the earth and fire sequence together with this set because they're 3 and 4. And we have 39 and 40 as a sequence together. So earth and moon here is called trouble. And it's sort of the moonrise over the mountain. So you're not going to try to like continue scaling your mountain at night, probably. You're probably going to rest for a minute, but you are indeed still scaling the mountain. So there's another pause element here, a different kind of stopping. As we saw with these two over here, which were kinds of stopping. So when you see the moon as simply the moon, for some reason, described, you have a sort of stopping sense to it. And that's all I got, but maybe these will shed some light on how that moon element sort of comes into play, the many forms that it takes in the I Ching, and maybe that will give you some thing to reflect on for the new moon, the last new moon of the year before we begin our new one, our new year.